I want to start this address by paying tribute to the thousands of men and women that are engaged in peacekeeping internationally. Men and women that are deployed to enforce and maintain peace in distant lands, in environments involved in conflicts which they often don't understand at all. I'm going to talk specifically about an African experience. Not that what I'm going to say doesn't apply to the rest of the world, but our stomping ground has been Africa, and it's where we've had the most opportunity to make a difference. There's no doubt that in recent years, the role of peacekeeping in Africa has significantly transformed this continent. There's no doubt that the work that peacekeeping has done has gone a long way to building the bridges and the foundations on which the growth and development on the continent are going to be sustainable. Not very long ago, our continent was considered to be the absolute basket case of the international community. For years, most African countries had been dealing with the realities of borders that had been imposed on them in a previous century. And despite these handicaps, this continent started its epic journey to freedom and has made amazing, amazing progress. We have by now moved to a point of democracy in most countries. And it's been a great achievement to get to a point where democracy is in fact a reality. We've also got to a point where the continent as a collective is starting to deal with some of our realities and starting to deal with some of its challenges in a constructive fashion. The cliched phrase, African solutions to African problems, has never been stronger than it is right now. The United Nations will assist, as will others. But it's the people of this continent that will build durable peace and security and ensure sustainable development. Over the past few years, African soldiers, diplomats, politicians have participated in numerous peacekeeping operations around the world and have developed a solid reputation for being some of the best peacekeepers around. There is no chance that a well-trained soldier can have any effect whatsoever if he's not correctly resourced. In any peacekeeping mission, there are many things that you cannot control. Many things. You cannot control the terrain. You can't control the realities of the ethnic issues on the ground. You can't control a huge host of things, but there are things you can control. And one of the key things that you can control is to ensure that you actually have the tools to do your job. And I believe that every deploying nation has the responsibility to its peacekeepers, has responsibility to the success of the mission, to ensure that they, in fact, do properly resource their teams. Even though most mandates now call for self-sustainment, it's very rare that African contingents are able to do so. The scale of investment required is so huge that very few countries can actually afford it. And assumptions are made by the United Nations and others that the resources exist within these countries' armed forces. The reality is that in 90% of cases they don't. The truth is that most of the time, lack of budget and lack of ability to raise the necessary capital is the cause for exactly these problems. My team and I are very well acquainted with this because this is the reality we've been dealing with for the last 15 years. Our approach has been to focus on finding creative, innovative solutions to the dilemmas that are faced by most of these countries. And I suppose that one of the secrets to Paramount's success has been our ability to overcome what I call paralysis by analysis. We've gone into countries, focused on understanding their specific challenges, thought completely out of the box, solved the problems, and then afterwards, we've sat down to try and work out the theory. We have an interesting conflict in the world today. Half the world sees peacekeeping as military activity, and half the world sees peacekeeping as an essential social responsibility. The IMF and the World Bank sit in the middle, and they're still convinced it's a military activity. Now, in a developing country that has major socioeconomic problems, the last thing you do is allow the Minister of Finance to deploy funds to what is perceived to be military expenditure. So you can't fund peacekeeping equipment the same way as you would fund a bridge, or you'd fund a road, or you'd fund a school or a hospital. So the first step was to go and create financing structures that would be IMF and World Bank compliant, because you cannot change their thinking. It's just not possible. We've tried, trust me. The documents were all written in the 60s and the 70s, and those same documents are still being applied today. And we live with this every single day. So we created structures that allowed us to develop financing systems that would be IMF and World Bank compliant, that would place the minimum burden on the economy, and that would try and find a way to turn these peacekeeping missions into an export, a currency-generating export. Okay. In order to do this, we had to create a turnkey solution. Why? Because if we were going to carry the risk on the financing, we had to be able to provide systems that worked, we had to provide the training that was necessary to operate the systems, and we needed to make absolutely sure that we could that we could support these systems throughout the life cycle of the equipment. Simple reality: as close as you are to your customer, it doesn't matter if your equipment stops working, they're going to stop paying you. So we created a turnkey solution, which also now allowed these countries to deploy in such a fashion that the reimbursives would be regular and consistent. Financing the equipment and the financial implications are not the only things that are important. You have to make sure that there's appropriate technology applied. There's a lot of talk in UN circles about changing the way that peacekeeping missions are funded. But this talk's been going on for years and years. There isn't yet a solution. So what do? We break the payments down, we break these big packages down into long-term financings, between 5 and 7 years. We go into the Ministry of Finance and we say, how much can your cash flow afford? And we then structure the package according to the cash flow. We don't look for collateral in the traditional sense. In many cases, we have given countries credit that we know cannot repay immediately, but we're prepared to take the risk because we can see a long-term future. Very few countries can't find $2.5 million a quarter for a peacekeeping mission. Makes it look very simple. 5 years, $50 million, quarterly installments, $2.5 million. It's complex. A lot of thought's gone into how we create these structures. But we've done it, we do it every day, and we are very, very committed, extremely committed to continuing to do it, because we believe that every African country, every country in the developing world has not only the right, but the obligation to be able to do this. Our team's very proud of the work that we do. We derive a lot of satisfaction in knowing that we're making a difference. And in our own way, We believe that we're making a positive contribution to the continent.